Welcome, everyone, to another edition, another chapter of our podcast, Seeing Opportunity in Devastation and Stories to Inspire. Um, a hearty and a warm welcome to Ed, as usual, who's hosting this with me and who is our primary storyteller. And looking forward to what you got for us this week, Ed. Over to you.
Thank you, Jacques. Just to tell listeners that we've just been discussing books, and I wonder how many books listeners read. And some of the books we were discussing are old classic uh, marketing and business books like Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which has since been updated, which formed a absolute basis behind a lot of um, people's thinking for many, many decades. Um, there's another book called Up the Organization, a series of essays on how to manage an organization. Now, it's probably a lot more than 50 years out of date now, but the lessons in it remain absolutely classic. And I know that many, many modern business strategists still refer to the old classic Rees and Trout positioning, the battle for your mind, which remains the absolute foundation of something we've been talking about here, market niching, how to become the expert in a particular field and all of the theory that went behind that. And that has spawned a dozen books, probably hundreds of books. Notable books are things like The Purple Cow, Duct Tape Marketing, and some others which are much more modern books. But they're all based on the same kind of thinking that you need to go to a person and the person's mind, they called it a chrono in the person's mind. A chrono is like a hole, an entrance into the person's mind. They said you have to find the chrono which where your brand will be recognized. And you can have you can have two or three people using that same chrono, doing the same kind of pitch to that same kind of market. Um, but more than that, and you're just one of the others. If you can't be the number one or the number two occupiers of that chrono, go away and find a new chrono. Find a different way to move in. That's if you want to succeed. And that's theory that came out in the 1970s, perhaps early 80s. It's certainly 40 years old now. And
Hmm.
yet, if you read that book today, and I read it again not that long ago, um, it's as modern as it was then. It has been updated with modern thinking and, with the internet of mind and so on under a different title. But it's even the original is well worthwhile looking at, and it forms the basis of a topic that I want to spend some time on today, which is how to narrow the top end of your funnel, um, the input of all of the people who are coming to look at you. But just before I do that, I want to share with you something which I learned last night when I attended a meeting of the virtual chapter of that wonderful organization, the Public Speakers Association of Southern Africa, PSA, PSASA. And one of the speakers at our meeting last night was Leon Latchan. Now, Leon is no hidden person. He's very well known. He's international speaker, coach, author, specialist in entrepreneurship. And Leon, as a part of his discussion, talked about sales funnels and said the usual model where the wide bit is at the top and the narrow bit is at the bottom, which we've been using, perhaps should be reversed so that you had the wide bit at the bottom and the narrow bit at the top. Because people don't so much fall into your funnel, but you entice them into your funnel. You pull them up into your funnel. Whether you be a retail store that has an attractive window display, an attractive signage, and an attractive name that persuades people to come and have a look at what you're doing, or whether you're running extensive and very successful marketing campaigns on the internet, or whether it is simply your brand, your reputation, the word of mouth that is dragging people into your funnels. And then you pull them up through your funnel, through your sales processes. And at every step along the way, you must get these little micro yeses. So the first micro yes is looking at your advertising, for instance. The second micro yes might be opening the door and coming into a store, or uh, clicking through onto a landing page. And the third micro step might be spending time on the landing page or not walking out of the retail store immediately. And the fourth micro yes might be walking over to the counter and engaging the counter assistant, or clicking through the landing page for more information. And so it will go on until such time as either that prospective buyer has crawled right out of the top of the funnel and has become a customer, or one of those little micro yeses became a no, in which case, dump, they fall straight out the bottom of the funnel again. It's actually a very nice model, don't you think, Jacques?
Well, it's certainly revolutionary. I was just thinking, I mean, turning the sales funnel upside down, and as you going through the micro yeses, sort of the decision making is very efficient in a way of whether or not to pursue the particular person that is browsing and spending some time, whether online or in your store, is being able to make that decision upfront and much earlier in that conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I
Love
think
it.
that, yeah, I think it's an interesting model. I think perhaps if there's a fault with it, the fault with it says that the prospective buyer will decide whether they exit the top or fall out the bottom, as if you didn't have an influence on that. And I think you should have an influence on that, because people coming into your store and looking at things and um, trying on clothing and that sort of thing can be dreadful time wasters, occupy a lot of resource, and are never going to buy. You're not qualifying out. Same as people who want to, uh, you know, have demonstrations and proposals, and they're never going to buy. You haven't qualified them out. So you need to add that dimension of being able to intervene in the process, not leave it entirely to the prospective buyer. But an interesting model anyway, and yeah, certainly one worth thinking about and perhaps using in the future. So,
Yes.
having shared that, the um, the subject that I really want to address during today is narrowing the top of the funnel. And what that means is going to a narrower niche. And it all starts with, to a degree, I suppose, how we describe ourselves. And again, this is from Leon Lartigan, an example he used, although there are many such examples, which says if we describe ourselves as I describe myself, as a mentor and a public speaker and a facilitator, so what? So if someone's looking for a mentor, they're going to pass over my advertising and my social media presence and everything else. And unless something catches their eye, I'm just another one in the crowd. Um, if you, Jacques, described yourself as a business coach who coaches mainly in the corporate and government arena, um, once again, you're one of many, many, many. Although you might think that you're in a niche, um, you're in fact in a very, very broad niche. So
Mm,
to
I
take
agree.
myself, if I say that I'm a mentor specifically in marketing and sales to to SMEs or to entrepreneurs, um, once again, it's very, very broad, very, very broad indeed. If I said that I am an expert in driving marketing campaigns to generate new business for manufacturing industries working in metal, then I've succeeded in creating a créneau. I need to be sure that that créneau exists, that it can be created, that there is a need for that kind of service in that kind of industry. But once I've achieved that, then anyone who stumbles on who's in my target audience, who stumbles on my profile and my information, or to whom I reach out by means of email or advertising or anything like that, has got to say, well, that's interesting. That's my field. So when we talk about narrowing the top of the funnel, it is really to be able to put less people in the top, of which a higher number will convert to sales, or in the bottom, whichever way up you want to phrase show your funnel. So the whole objective is to put less people into the funnel and have a higher proportion of those converting into sales. Because the more you can do that, the more efficient you become, the less time you waste. We looked at an illustration some time ago where out of 100 starting, one was successful, or perhaps none were successful. Now, that is enormously wasteful of time, energy, money, and all the other dimensions of potential cost and frustration. If we narrow that down to 10 with two being sold, we're still only 20% efficient. If we narrow that down to 10 with 4 or 5 being sold, then we are doing some really seriously good niche marketing. Now, that's nice in theory. How do you actually derive that? How do you get there? What do you have to do to build that kind of very tight niche? It's not easy. And especially if you are not making a lot of money at the moment, it is very tempting to just go and grab whatever is around. And this is particularly true of startup companies or early stage companies, where you simply have to grab any income that you can find in order to survive, in order to get started. And after the sort of hard times that we've been through with the COVID epidemic and everything else, it is also a time where many people will simply grab anything that moves if it produces revenue. And I guess you need to know, first of all, at whether there's anything going into that funnel. We, we often have businesses, especially in the in the services industry, like yours and mine, Jacques, where in fact we don't have a big sales funnel at all.
Mm.
We might be talking to two or three people at one time, and selling to two out of three of those. And that's great. So long as those two or three provide us with the luxury life that we really want to live and the job satisfaction that we really want. And again, there are many, many businesses that are so staid and so stable that their sales funnel actually doesn't exist at all, because all they have are their customers. They have a one to one relationship. So they have customers who also buy from them. So there is no sales funnel. And they can continue for years in that vein, and sometimes for years being very, very profitable and getting a lot of satisfaction. I remember a colleague of mine some time ago who told of a time where he was employed by an organization that was of that kind of character as a salesperson. He was given a territory, a certain number of customers to go and see and to pick up orders from, and he did that very successfully. And then he was an efficient sort of guy, so he had some spare time, so he went around, did some canvassing, and picked up a new customer. And when he brought the new customer back in, very proud, he was actually looked at askance. And the management team said, "But we don't know these people. They might not pay us. How do we know that this is good business coming into us, that it won't disrupt us?" I don't think that that would happen today, but it wasn't too long ago that that kind of mentality existed. That we have our customers and we don't want any more. We're very stable with where we are. We're going to continue with doing what we're doing because that's what we do. Our marketing tends to be all around uh, things like golf days and other events for customers, boxes at sporting events and similar. And then again, there's no sales funnel at all. They're not driving any new business in there. But that's a dangerous business model, because the danger of that business model is that customers will change. Management will change and perhaps not use the same suppliers. The customer might themselves go out of business. The customer might be absorbed by another company, um, acquired by another company who has different buying policies. So over a time, there is an attrition of any customer base. And unless new customers are added to that base, the base will shrink over a period of time. So you do need your sales funnel, and the people like us really should have a sales funnel so that we can predict not what we're going to be doing next week, but what we're going to be doing in 3 months' time, and perhaps 6 months' time, and perhaps later. So that we should be developing, we should be pushing these potential clients into the bottom end of our funnel. And then we need to know very clearly what are those clients, potential clients, that we're pushing into the bottom of our funnel. Now, it doesn't matter if we're a business coach or an engineering firm or a stationery supplier or a retail store, it still is clear that we must appeal to an audience, to a particular audience, unless we have megabucks to attract audiences of all types to us. So if you're a big hypermarket, this rule doesn't apply. Although the retail grocery industry is highly segmented. So in certain parts of the country and in certain economic areas, you will get one range of outlets. of brands, and in another area you'll get a different range of brands. And those brands would not work everywhere in the country at either end of the scale. So even in that, they have niched their market, although they have a fairly broad appeal. Since you and I don't have the budget of a ShopRite or a Pick and Pay or a Checkers or any of those, we have to box a little smarter and choose who we wish to appeal to. So, my suggestion to anyone listening to this um, program is that they should look at where their strengths lie, and then, having determined that, they should look at what those people are saying, what they are commenting on, where their pain points on. And you can pick a niche by something like an interest group, a focus group on LinkedIn or Facebook or any of those, and then listen into that Facebook. You can listen into a topic, a hashtag topic on Twitter, and see what those people are saying. So if you have an expertise in, I don't know, let's say I have an expertise in mentoring um, mid-range IT businesses focused on software. Now, I could go and find a focus group on probably LinkedIn talking about vendors of software, and then see what the membership of the group was, whether they were all the giants or the mid range firms. And if they were the mid range firms, I could join that forum or at least listen into that forum and start looking at what their problems are. That's one way of doing it. Other way of doing it is a lovely tool. I don't think we've talked about this, but it's called Google Trends. I don't know if you've heard of that, Jacques.
Ed, you and I have certainly discussed it offline,
Okay.
especially on a Friday afternoon, watching the sun go
Yes.
down.
Yeah. So Google Trends is a marvelous tool where you can go in and see what people are putting into their search strings on Google. So if you, for instance, are looking at, I don't know, panel beaters, if you typed in panel beating, you will get a trend of when that term is used and how common that term is compared to another term like metalworking, for instance. And you could draw comparative graphs and you could see surprising number of terms have seasonality in them. So they're much more prevalent at one time of the year than at another time of the year. You only have to type in the word chocolate to see that happen. And you can make comparisons between what terms you think are important. So let me give you an illustration. If I typed in there lost sales and saw what sort of trend was coming out of that, where are people looking at lost sales? I would see whether, in fact, people are interested in it at all, and whether the topic was becoming more and more important or less and less important over a period of years. And then I could narrow it down to a year and look at where it was important during the calendar year or during a financial year. I can cut and dice at any way. If I now make a comparison between that term and a term like new sales, then I would see how important in the marketplace people are considering new business versus old sales. Very efficient tool on using it. I would urge listeners to go and pick up Google Trends and go and play around. It's a lovely rabbit hole to go down. You can spend an awful lot of time, and it gets into very deep analytics. You can do this by province, you can do this by country, you can do it by continent. It is an extremely valuable tool to select your niche. I think that's about what we have time for today, Jacques.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Very, very interesting. And as we're building on this topic, talking about initially when you introduced the topic of sales funnels and bleeding out of the sides of this sales funnel, and then explaining to us about what the different or being aware that we need to measure the different stages of the sales funnel so that we can get down to the narrow end. And I mean, today's topic just says, well, there's a broad approach in the beginning, rather than trying to chase ratios at the narrow end. In the beginning, be discerning, spend the time to be discerning. What I particularly like is, and it's like very obvious when one considers why we're in business. Yes, we in business to offer services, to make sure that and be paid for it, whether it's services or products. But the key is in terms of developing or understanding what the needs are out there, because when you're in business, you're trying to solve a problem. And I liked your phrase where you saying, listen, find out what the pain points are of your niche market. And very practically, just the two areas as a start, of course, is joining forums, listening to what those are and who in particular is saying, or what are they saying in particular, and what are the characteristics of the people perhaps raising these issues. But then also Google Trends. This is something that you have been talking about for so long, and I must say personally, I have not gone down this rabbit hole, and I think it's time that I should, Ed, and actually go and test drive this one for sure. But it's very, very practical.
I guarantee you will not be disappointed. Just think of some interesting terms to put there. But as the person who coached me on this advised me, never put the word sex in there. Because by comparison to any other term that you can think of, uh, you'll get a nice curve through the middle of the page on sex, and the other will just be a flat line at the bottom of the screen by comparison. We think about sex a little more frequently than we think about business issues, apparently, or
And
chocolate.
there's an industry for that, not particularly in our interest. But
Yeah.
yes, thank you, Ed. Thank you to the listeners today for joining us and staying with us until the end. Um, we edit our talk a little bit, but then we publish it on YouTube. And the place to go looking for it is Griffin Enterprise Development. That's the YouTube channel where you will find all our episodes that we publish. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Ed, for once again adding practical value to our businesses.
Great pleasure. See you next week.